As we leave the quiet of Roman homes behind, we step into a world of noise, anticipation, and spectacle, where the pulse of the city beats loudest. Picture the vast Colosseum rising from the earth like a stone leviathan, its arches framing the midday sun, shadows moving across tiers filled with tens of thousands of eager spectators. The air is thick with dust, sweat, and the mingled aromas of cooking fires and oil lamps. Voices rise in a unified roar, a wave of sound that surges through the stone corridors, bouncing off the walls and filling the amphitheater with a sense of primal excitement. Here gladiators soften slaves, prisoners, all trained professionals prepare for combat, their armor glinting, muscles taut, eyes scanning the crowd as if the very gaze of thousands could determine the outcome. Some researchers believe that these games were more than entertainment. They were a demonstration of Roman power, a ritualistic assertion of control over life and death. Others suggest they offered a temporary escape, a place where citizens of all classes could witness the raw spectacle of courage and violence, the clash of weapons, the thunder of hooves during chariot races, the roar of lions and tigers brought from distant provinces, each sound and sight designed to overwhelm, to mesmerize, to remind the audience of their own place within the empire. Yet, entertainment in Rome was not solely blood and battle. Comedy theaters filled with laughter, mime performances evoking tears, and musical recitals offered moments of relief, reflection, and shared emotion. Festivals and public ceremonies turned the streets into rivers of color, scent, and sound, with banners fluttering, incense smoke drifting, and musicians playing unfamiliar instruments that hinted at the vastness of the empire. Even the common plebeian, arriving from a crowded insula, would be momentarily transported, swept into a world larger than their narrow lives, where history, myth, and raw human drama intertwined. Amidst this chaos, we can imagine the silence that fell in anticipation of a decisive moment. The pause before life or death was sealed in the arena. The thrill, the fear, and the spectacle were inseparable, leaving a lingering mark on those who watched. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the sand-strewn arena, the crowds would spill back into the streets, carrying with them the echoes of roars and cheers, laughter and horror, a cacophony that lingered in the city's heartbeat. And yet, as we leave behind the spectacle of the arenas, one question remains, hanging in the Roman dusk. What did such displays of power and mortality teach a civilization, and what shadows did they cast over the minds of those who witnessed them? Next, we move from the public arenas to the quiet corridors of Roman education and intellectual pursuit. As the echoes of the Colosseum fade into the evening, we shift our focus from the roar of the crowd to the hushed murmurs of learning, where the future of Rome was quietly being shaped. Imagine a small room filled with the scent of waxed tablets and parchment scrolls, where the clatter of styluses striking surfaces competes with the voices of children reciting lessons aloud. Education in Rome was not free, and its cost often depended on the reputation of the teacher, a subtle reminder that knowledge itself was a commodity, valued yet measured. The youngest children began with Eludius, a school where basic literacy and arithmetic were drilled into their minds, often through repetition and memory. Discipline was strict. Some researchers suggest that corporal punishment was common, intended to instill obedience and focus, while others argue it reflected a broader societal expectation of resilience and endurance. From these modest beginnings, a child of means could progress to the grammaticus, a teacher of grammar, literature, and language, where they would absorb the works of Greek and Roman authors. Here, learning extended beyond the mere mechanics of reading and writing. It was a subtle initiation into culture, ethics, and persuasion. Greek was often taught alongside Latin, reflecting the high value placed on bilingualism and the cultural prestige of Hellenistic learning. Rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking, became the crown jewel of a Roman education, an indispensable skill in a society where political debate, public oration, and courtroom arguments determined fortunes and set fates. For the wealthiest, the education could culminate in studies of philosophy and rhetoric under private tutors, resembling what we might now call a university education. Libraries, both public and private, offered access to scrolls containing the thoughts of philosophers, historians, and poets, their pages whispering ideas that had traversed generations and empires. Public lectures and debates transformed civic spaces into arenas of the mind, where the educated elite gathered to test ideas, challenge assumptions, and refine their reasoning. Yet not all Romans admired this intellectual rigor. Some lamented the overwhelming influence of Greek culture, fearing it eroded traditional Roman values. Others criticized the harshness of schools and the focus on memorization over moral development. Despite the debate, education shaped the minds and ambitions of Roman citizens, preparing some for political life, others for careers in law, administration, or literature. As the candlelight flickers on the wax tablets and the city outside slowly quiets, one can almost hear the echoes of learnt voices, the rustle of scrolls, and the soft murmur of ideas taking root in intellectual heartbeat that pulsed quietly. Beneath the empire's grandeur, from the private chambers of learning, we now turn to the bustling streets and marketplaces, where the rhythms of daily life in Rome unfold in vivid, chaotic motion. From the quiet of the scholar's room we step into a vastly different world, where the air vibrates with energy, sense, and voices the bustling marketplaces of Rome, known as fora or mela. Imagine narrow streets lined with stalls of every imaginable type, the rich aroma of freshly baked bread mingling with the tang of fish, the earthy scent of fruits and vegetables, and the pungent, unavoidable odor of livestock. Farmers from the surrounding countryside brought grains, olives, and vegetables, while fishermen hawked their catches from the rivers and coasts, their nets glistening with scales under the sun. The market was not just a place to exchange goods. It was a theatre of negotiation, a space where haggling was both an art and a necessity. Coins clinked, voices rose in spirited debate, and the rhythmic cadence of Latin and other tongues filled the air, echoing against the stone buildings. Merchants peddled pottery, clothing, and jewelry, while exotic imports like silks, spices, and perfumes hinted at Rome's far-reaching trade networks, stretching from the deserts of Arabia to the forests of Germania. In some corners, slaves were bought and sold, a grim reminder of the society's dependence on human labor. Despite the apparent chaos, there was an unspoken order, a rhythm to the way Romans navigated the market, each participant aware of the social dance unfolding around them. Beyond commerce, the market was a social hub where news traveled faster than any courier could manage. Political debates erupted, gossip spread, and alliances were formed. Street performers entertained with music, juggling, and acrobatics, drawing crowds that paused momentarily from their errands. The richness of sensory detail was overwhelming the heat of the sun on worn stone streets. The rough texture of burlap sacks, the sheen of polished amphory, the temps of iron and sweat from laboring bodies. For the Roman citizen, the market was a microcosm of the empire itself, diverse, vibrant, structured yet chaotic, a place where wealth, status, and ambition were displayed openly. Yet, amid the bustle, one could also glimpse the inequalities of the society, the contrast between the patricians who occasionally strolled in opulent attire, sampling delicacies, and the plebeians who labored to provide the essentials. From this cacophony of trade and human activity, the city would gradually settle as the sun set, but the pulse of Rome never truly stopped. The marketplaces emptied, yet the echoes of daily life lingered in the air, hinting at the rhythm of a civilization at its peak, a society that thrived on connection, commerce, and constant motion. As the lights of the city dimmed, we prepare to follow the Roman citizen into the evening hours, where leisure, spectacle, and entertainment reveal yet another layer of life at the empire's heart. As the sun dips low and shadows stretch across the streets of Rome, the city does not fall silent. Rather, it shifts into a different rhythm, one defined by leisure, spectacle, and the complex interplay of culture and indulgence. The day's labors conclude, and citizens, whether patrician or plebeian, seek entertainment, respite, and social connection. Imagine walking along the cobbled streets where the aroma of roasted meats mingles with the scent of wine spilling from bustling taverns, where laughter and conversation ripple through the air like a gentle, constant hum. Theaters, grand and imposing, open their doors to crowds eager for comedy, tragedy, and satire. The playwright's words echo across stone seats, their cadence weaving stories of gods, mortals, and the human condition, captivating audiences with humor, pathos, and moral reflection. Yet, even more than the theatre, the gladiatorial games drew the hearts of Romans with an intensity difficult to comprehend. The Colosseum, a colossal structure capable of holding tens of thousands, became a stage for life and death, a place where the clash of steel and roar of the crowd merged into a singular, electrifying atmosphere. Slaves, criminals, and trained fighters, gladiators, entered the arena, muscles taut, weapons in hand, their fate determined by skill, courage, or the whims of the spectators. Lions, tigers, and other exotic beasts were unleashed, their roars reverberating, filling the air with tension and awe. Some researchers suggest that these spectacles were more than mere entertainment. They were a tool of social cohesion, a controlled outlet for human aggression, and a vivid demonstration of imperial power. For others, they were a reflection of society's obsession with violence, status, and spectacle, a grim reminder of inequality and human expendability. Beyond the blood and pageantry, Romans also sought gentler pleasures. Public baths or thermae offered warm water, steam, and the company of friends. Libraries and philosophical discussions provided intellectual stimulation. Music, dance, and poetry engaged the senses. The nights of Rome were layered with texture, the echoing clatter of sandals on stone, the soft murmur of fountains in courtyards, the flickering torchlight casting long shadows against marble, and the distant cheers of the Colosseum blending with the hum of city life. These experiences, whether violent or serene, reinforced social bonds, displayed cultural values, and left indelible impressions on the collective memory of the citizens. As the city gradually quieted and the embers of torches dimmed, one could sense the rhythm of Rome continuing beneath the surface, the lives of its people flowing with unending energy, ambition, and curiosity. And yet, as night settles fully, we find ourselves asking, what was the private life of a Roman like behind the grand public spectacles? The answer awaits in the quiet halls and intimate spaces of their homes, where wealth, status, and domesticity intertwine in unexpected ways. Step beyond the bustling streets and crowded markets of Rome, and we enter the intimate, often contrasting, the world of the Roman home, a place where the public grandeur of the city gives way to private rituals, domestic hierarchies, and the quiet rhythms of daily life. The homes of the wealthy, the domas, were sprawling complexes built around a central atrium, its open roof letting in sunlight and rain alike, a hub around which the family's life revolved. Floors were adorned with intricate mosaics depicting mythological scenes, hunting expeditions, or abstract patterns that gleamed beneath the soft glow of oil lamps. Frescoes covered the walls, painted in vibrant reds, blues, and golds, illustrating gods, heroes, and idyllic landscapes, while statues and busts stood silently in corners, embodying the family's heritage and taste. Off the atrium, rooms branched out in purposeful design, tricliniums for elaborate dining, cubicula for sleeping, and private baths for cleansing and reflection, each space signaling status and sophistication. Servants, often slaves, moved through these spaces with practiced efficiency, preparing meals, tending to the baths, and attending to the daily needs of the household, their presence both vital and invisible. Outside the domus, gardens offered a sanctuary of greenery, fountains, and carefully arranged plants, creating a microcosm of order amidst the chaotic energy of the city streets. The smells of olive oil, herbs, and fresh flowers mingled with earth. The scent of warm stone and cooking fires, a sensory tapestry that defined Roman domestic life. In stark contrast, the majority of Romans, the plebeians, lived in insulae, multi-story apartment buildings cramped with small rooms, narrow staircases, and shared water sources. These structures were often dangerously built, prone to collapse or fire, yet they were vibrant centers of community life, filled with chatter, smells of cooking, and the rhythm of daily survival. Within these modest spaces, families cooked over small hearths, children played amidst tight corridors, and neighbors formed networks of support and commerce. Some researchers suggest that this juxtaposition between opulent domus and humble insulae reflected the broader inequalities of Roman society, yet also created a unique social fabric where wealth, status, and survival intertwined daily. From the quiet of the private home, we glimpse the intimate routines that defined Roman life. Meals shared with family, whispered conversations in shaded courtyards, the careful instruction of children in reading, writing, and manners, and the moments of reflection or worship that punctuated the day. And as we step out of these private worlds, moving once more into the streets and public spaces, we begin to sense how the Romans balanced the grandeur of empire with the quiet intricacies of home life, a delicate dance between spectacle and intimacy that defined their civilization. But as night falls, one wonders, how did the empire ensure that such a sprawling and diverse population remained organized, obedient, and connected across its vast territories? As we leave the intimacy of Roman homes and step once more into the heart of the city, we find ourselves drawn to the pulse of power. The intricate machinery that governed an empire stretching from the windswept coasts of Britain to the sun-baked deserts of Egypt. Rome at the height of its might was a republic in name, yet an oligarchy in practice, a place where a handful of patrician families held the reins of influence, their lineage and wealth secure in generations of political dominance. The streets themselves seemed to echo with the quiet authority of these families, whose villas overlooked forums where law, debate, and commerce intertwined. Each year, 2 consuls were elected from among the Senate, the body of roughly 300 men who were the true arbiters of Roman policy, charged with managing the state, declaring war, and directing the course of legislation, while the people observed the voting and occasionally murmuring their approval or discontent. Beyond the consuls, magistrates such as praetors oversaw the courts, aediles managed public works and festivals, quaestors tended the treasury, and censors monitored both census and morality, each position a piece in the vast puzzle of governance. To balance the dominance of patricians, the plebeians, the common people had their tribunes, officials empowered with the ability to veto decisions deemed harmful to their class, a faint but crucial safeguard against absolute control. Yet, despite these systems, corruption ran deep. Bribes and political maneuvering were common. Elections could be manipulated, and wealth often dictated influence more than wisdom or merit. Civil unrest, political rivalry, and ambition sometimes spilled into violence, as the late Republic's turbulent years would show, culminating in the rise of extraordinary figures like Julius Caesar, whose charisma and military genius enabled him to bypass traditional checks of power and declare himself dictator for life. After his assassination, the shadow of chaos lingered until Octavian, later Augustus, assumed control, transitioning Rome from republic to empire, concentrating authority in the hands of a single ruler while maintaining the semblance of the Senate. Under the emperor's power became absolute, yet the illusion of republican order persisted, a symbolic theater to pacify both the elite and the masses. From behind closed doors and within the bustling forums, the people of Rome witnessed an endless dance of power, ambition, and law, a spectacle as complex as any gladiatorial contest. And as we ponder the might of these rulers and the fragility of the systems they maintained, one cannot help but wonder, how did ordinary Romans, the laborers, merchants, and plebeians experience this vast machinery of politics in their daily lives? And how did it shape the world around them? As we leave the chambers of power and step into the streets that pulse with the rhythm of everyday life, we enter the world of the average Roman citizen, where the grandeur of empire meets the grind of survival. The city of Rome itself was a sprawling labyrinth of narrow streets, bustling squares, and vibrant neighborhoods, each vicus possessing its own character, its own microcosm of society. The wealthy patricians, perched atop their lofty villas adorned with mosaics, frescoes, and atriums open to the sky, conducted their lives in a realm of opulence, where fountains whispered and gardens bloomed with imported flora. These estates were hubs of leisure, philosophical debate, and social display, where dinner parties could stretch from sunset to the early hours. Guests reclining on couches, wine flowing freely, and servants attending to every whim. Yet just beyond these sanctuaries, life was markedly different. The plebeians, the backbone of Rome, resided in insular multi-story apartment buildings packed tightly along narrow lanes. Here, the smells of cooking fires mingled with the less pleasant scents of the crowded city, and the constant hum of activity, children playing, merchants shouting, animals braying created a living symphony of urban existence. Fires were ever-present threats, and collapses of poorly constructed buildings were not uncommon. Yet the resilience of the inhabitants turned these cramped spaces into communities filled with shared stories, friendships, and local pride. Daily routines revolved around work, trade, and survival, but even amidst hardship, leisure found its place. Markets offered a feast for the senses. The colors of fresh produce, the glint of metals, the aroma of baked bread, and the cacophony of bargaining voices blending into a familiar, organized chaos. Public baths served as centers of hygiene, socialization, and even political discussion, where men and women, though in separate facilities, engaged in conversations ranging from gossip to matters of the state, their voices echoing across steaming rooms and mosaic floors. Children learned reading, writing, and arithmetic, often under the watchful eye of a tutor or in small schoolrooms, their lessons punctuated by the harsh discipline of a society that prized knowledge and obedience. Religion interwove with daily life, from the morning offerings to household gods to the grand ceremonies at city temples, shaping behavior and belief. And as evening descended, the streets transformed once more taverns and inns filled with patrons. Amphitheaters roared with spectacles, and the city, a place of contrasts, settled into a rhythm of human existence. In this intricate dance between wealth and struggle, leisure and labor, devotion and desire, the ordinary Romans lived lives both vivid and precarious, caught in the vast web of empire. And as we linger among them, one question persists. What did it truly feel like to exist at the center of a civilization so grand, yet so fragile? As we lift our gaze from the bustling streets and immerse ourselves in the very structures that defined Rome, we begin to grasp the grandeur and ingenuity of Roman architecture, a testament to a civilization obsessed with scale, permanence, and spectacle. The city itself was a sprawling mosaic of stone, marble, and brick, where every neighborhood told a story through its buildings and public spaces. Towering domes rose above the skyline, aqueducts arched gracefully across valleys, and forums buzzed with both commerce and debate, a physical manifestation of Rome's organizational genius. Among these marvels, the homes of the wealthy that doma stood as private kingdoms, each built around a central atrium where sunlight filtered through an open roof, illuminating intricate mosaics that depicted gods, heroes, and mythic tales. Frescoes adorned walls with vibrant colors, capturing scenes of daily life, landscapes, and theatrical performances, while small gardens offered fragrant reprieves from the city's chaos. Beyond these opulent homes, the insulae that housed the majority of Romans rose like crowded cliffs, each floor stacked with apartments that were functional but perilous, their wooden beams and thin walls a constant reminder of fragility in a world of ambition. Public buildings, however, were where Roman engineering truly spoke. The Colosseum, a colossal amphitheater of stone and concrete, could hold tens of thousands of spectators, each seat meticulously arranged to offer both safety and spectacle. Here, Gladiators clashed, exotic animals roared, and the crowd's roar became a symphony of excitement and dread. The Circus Maximus stretched further still, a venue for chariot races that could accommodate over 100,000 spectators, where the thunder of hooves and the cheers of the masses created a collective heartbeat echoing through the city. Aqueducts, running for miles across the landscape, carried fresh water into Rome, supplying fountains, baths and homes, a network that seemed almost magical in its reach and efficiency. The public baths themselves were microcosms of Roman life, places of hygiene, leisure, conversation, and political maneuvering, filled with heated pools, steam rooms, and libraries. Streets were lined with temples and shrines, each dedicated to gods whose favor was sought for protection, prosperity, and guidance. Even the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer system, whispered of the Romans' meticulous attention to sanitation and urban planning. As night fell and the city quieted, shadows danced across these structures, and one could almost hear the echoes of footsteps, laughter, and debate that had traversed centuries. To walk these streets was to move through both time and ambition, to feel the pulse of a city that sought to impress, to endure, and to dominate. And yet, behind every grand facade, an engineered marvel, questions lingered. How did the ordinary citizen truly experience this monumental city? And how much of Rome's grandeur was a veneer over fragility and danger? As we move from the towering domes and intricate mosaics of Roman architecture to the bustling arteries of commerce, we enter the Mela, the marketplaces that pulsed at the heart of the empire, carrying the lifeblood of trade, conversation, and social interaction. Imagine walking down a sunlit street, the air thick with the scent of fresh bread, olive oil, and spices imported from distant lands, a blend so rich it almost overwhelms the senses. Stalls lined every corner, each manned by a vendor shouting to be heard over the chorus of haggling voices, the clatter of coins, and the rhythmic thump of hooves from carts laden with goods. Farmers sold their produce with pride, plump figs, ripe grapes, vibrant vegetables, while fishermen displayed the silver glint of freshly caught fish on beds of crushed ice, and bakers offered golden loaves still warm from the oven. Among the everyday items were wares of luxury, silks from the East, precious metals, glassware, and intricately carved pottery. Even slaves, considered property in Roman society, could be seen lined up for inspection, their fates determined by the whims of buyers and the shifting currents of fortune. The marketplace was more than an economic hub. It was a social stage where news spread, alliances formed, and reputations were made or broken. Some researchers suggest that these gatherings functioned almost as an early form of media, a place where information traveled faster than any messenger could deliver. Amidst the cacophony, one could hear snippets of conversation in Latin, Greek, and other tongues, a reminder of the empire's vast and diverse population. Wealthy patricians might stroll past, negotiating luxury goods, while plebeians bartered fiercely for the sustenance of their families. The scale was immense, the sights and sounds overwhelming to a foreign visitor. Yet the Romans navigated it with practiced ease, understanding the rhythm of trade, the dance of supply and demand, and the subtle art of persuasion. Beyond the city, the empire's vast network of roads and sea routes ensured that goods from Britannia, Egypt, and Asia Minor arrived with remarkable speed, linking distant provinces to the beating heart of Rome. And yet, beneath the surface of prosperity and abundance, questions lingered. How did these marketplaces cope with inequality, scarcity, and the unpredictable whims of nature? What stories of ambition, deception, and survival unfolded in the shadows of the stalls. As the day drew to a close and the last coins clinked into the hands of vendors, the echoes of commerce faded, leaving behind the lingering mystery of the empire's endless appetite for trade and wealth. As the sun climbs higher over the rooftops of the eternal city, we shift our focus from the clamor of the markets to the intricate tapestry of daily life, where every Roman, from patrician to plebeian, played a part in the grand story of the empire. Imagine the streets teeming with movement, children darting between stalls, merchants calling out their wares, and citizens navigating the uneven cobblestones with purpose and familiarity. For the wealthy patricians, life was a display of power and opulence. Their grand villas, often located on elevated hills or sprawling estates outside the city, were adorned with frescoes depicting gods and heroes, intricate mosaics depicting scenes of conquest and leisure, and rooms furnished with plush couches, gilded decorations, and private baths where water flowed from aqueducts with a gentle, rhythmic hiss. Here, elaborate banquets were commonplace, where the aroma of roasted meats, exotic spices, and fine wine filled the air, while guests reclined on cushions, engaging in animated conversations about politics, philosophy, and literature. In stark contrast, the plebeians lived in towering apartment blocks tightly packed along narrow streets, often several stories high, with small windows that barely let in sunlight and staircases that creaked under the weight of countless feet. Fires and collapses were frequent, a reminder of the precariousness of lower-class life. Yet within these walls, communities thrived. Neighbors shared meals, news, and gossip, while children played in the cramped courtyards, their laughter rising above the constant hum of the city. Public spaces provided vital respite. Bathhouses were not just centers for hygiene, but for social interaction, where Romans of all classes gathered to exercise, discuss politics, and relax in heated pools and steam rooms, the scent of oils and herbs permeating the air. Education, though private and often costly, was prized across society. Tutors instructed children in Latin, Greek, arithmetic, rhetoric, and philosophy, preparing some for public office or military service, while others absorbed lessons simply to navigate the complex social world around them. Religion interwove with daily life as well, with temples, altars, and shrines scattered throughout the city, where offerings and prayers were made to deities for protection, fortune, and favor, a ritualistic rhythm underscoring each citizen's existence. Amidst these routines of work, worship, and leisure, the city's pulse never slowed, and yet beneath the surface, there was always tension, the hum of inequality, the potential for unrest, and the silent question, how long could this intricate balance of wealth, labor, and ambition truly endure? As we step into the quieter corners of Roman life, away from the bustling streets and markets, we find ourselves in the hushed chambers of learning, where the future citizens of the empire were molded by discipline, intellect, and the weight of expectation. Roman education was not free, and its cost often reflected the reputation and skill of the teacher, a sign of both prestige and the family's commitment to cultivating excellence. The first stage began at home, where a paterfamilias might oversee the earliest lessons, guiding children through the fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic, their small hands brushing against wax tablets and styluses, while the air rang with the persistent rhythm of recited alphabets and numbers. Once the basics were mastered, children advanced to the grammaticus, a teacher of literature and language, where the curriculum expanded to include the works of great Roman and Greek authors. Here, the child absorbed not only words, but the cultural and moral lessons embedded in epic poetry and prose, learning the subtle art of argument and persuasion, essential skills in a society where public speaking could shape destiny. Greek, in particular, was emphasized. Bilingualism was a mark of sophistication, a gateway to understanding philosophy, science, and history in their original texts. The Grammaticus also introduced rhetoric, teaching students how to craft speeches that could sway juries, councils, and audiences. Each word carefully measured, each gesture deliberate. For those fortunate enough, education continued to the level of philosophy and advanced rhetoric, a stage akin to modern university studies, preparing young men for careers in law, politics, and administration. But learning was not confined to formal settings. The Romans were avid consumers of Greek culture and philosophy, and libraries, both public and private, offered scrolls filled with the wisdom of the ancients. From Aristotle's observations on ethics to Cicero's treatises on governance, public lectures and debates provided forums for intellectual exchange, where ideas clashed and merged in the open air or within grand halls, the voices of orators rising above the hum of attentive listeners. Despite its sophistication, Roman education faced criticism. Some argued that the focus on Greek language and culture eroded traditional Roman virtues, while others decried the strict discipline often enforced with corporal punishment. Yet, whether celebrated or condemned, education was a cornerstone of Roman society, shaping minds, values, and the very fabric of the empire. As we leave the echoing halls of learning and turn our gaze once more to the streets and squares, one cannot help but wonder how the lessons learned in these silent rooms reverberated through the public life of Rome, influencing decisions, debates, and the destiny of a civilization that stretched from the hills of Italy to the farthest reaches of the known world. Next, we move from the quiet of scholarly halls to the vibrant chaos of the Roman marketplace, or Mela, the very heartbeat of daily life in the empire. Here, the air was thick with the scent of fresh bread, olive oil, herbs, and the occasional tang of fish from the coastal trade. Stalls overflowed with goods both local and imported, from coarse woolen tunics and simple pottery to luxurious silks, spices, and perfumes carried across the empire's vast roads and seas. Farmers called out their wares, voices rising above the hum of negotiation, while fishmongers displayed their catches, glistening in the morning sun, scales catching light like shards of glass. The market was more than commerce. It was a theatre of human interaction, where news travelled faster than any courier. Political opinions were debated, and friendships were forged amidst the clamour of haggling. Coins clinked, hands gestured, and voices rose and fell like a living symphony of trade. A carefully orchestrated chaos that only Romans could navigate with ease. Meat was a rarity, often reserved for those who could afford it, while grains, olives, and wine formed the staples of everyday life. Fruits and vegetables, lentils, beans, and aromatic herbs lined the stalls in a riot of colour, providing sustenance and flavour to the bustling city. Yet, the marketplace was not solely about survival. It reflected the empire's wealth, diversity, and interconnectedness. Exotic goods from distant provinces, Egyptian linen, Spanish silver moved alongside everyday essentials, a tangible reminder of Rome's vast reach and influence. The market also served as a stage for social performance. Merchants displayed their cunning, buyers flaunted knowledge of prices, and children darted between stalls, their laughter weaving through the crowd. For the foreign visitor, the market could seem overwhelming, chaotic even, yet for Romans, it was a rhythm of life, a daily dance that balanced commerce, conversation, and community. And as the sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across cobblestones and wooden carts, the market would slowly empty, leaving behind the echoes of voices, the scent of bread and herbs lingering in the air, and the memory of a world in perpetual motion. But as night approached, another layer of Roman life awakened, one of leisure, spectacle, and entertainment, where the same citizens who bartered and traded would seek diversion, excitement, and sometimes danger. What awaited them after the marketplace closed? The answer lies in the arenas and theaters that defined Roman recreation and obsession. Step away from the bustling streets and markets, and we enter the intimate spaces where Romans lived, where the grandeur of empire meets the private rhythms of daily life. The homes of the wealthy, known as domas, are marvels of architectural ambition, sprawling structures built around a central atrium that serves as both a gathering space and a symbol of status. Here, marble floors glint under the light that filters through the open roof. Mosaics depicting mythological scenes line the walls, and frescoes breathe color and narrative into every room. Each space within the domos has a purpose: dining rooms designed for lavish feasts, bedrooms offering privacy, and bath chambers where the ritual of cleansing blends with social display. Some researchers believe that these homes were designed not merely for comfort, but as instruments of power, reflecting the wealth and influence of their owners, while others suggest they were spaces where culture, art, and philosophy merged seamlessly with daily life. In stark contrast, the majority of Rome's citizens live in insulae, multi-story apartment buildings that rise precariously above the crowded streets. These structures are cramped, poorly maintained, and vulnerable to fire and collapse. Yet they house the vast majority of the urban population. Within these walls, life is intimate and communal. Families share small rooms, neighbors interact in narrow corridors, and every sound echoes through the tight quarters. The contrast between domos and insula is stark, a visual and social reminder of the inequality that permeates Roman society. Yet within both spaces there is life, ritual, and community. The city itself is a canvas of Roman engineering genius. Aqueducts channel water from distant hills into fountains, baths, and private homes. Sewers like the Cloaca Maxima drain waste, silently sustaining hygiene and health. Streets aligned with temples, forums, and public buildings that give form to civic life. The Romans blend practicality with aesthetic ambition, creating spaces that are at once functional and symbolic, a reflection of a civilization obsessed with order, beauty, and status. Walking through these neighborhoods, one can almost hear the soft murmur of family conversations, the laughter of children playing in courtyards, the distant hum of commerce continuing beyond the gates, reminding us that life in Rome is lived as much within walls as it is on the streets. And as evening falls and lamps flicker in atria and insulae alike, we are left to wonder, how did the inhabitants of such contrasting worlds perceive their city? And what did it feel like to sleep beneath the same sky that stretched over both splendor and struggle? As the sun begins its descent over the sprawling city, casting long shadows across cobbled streets and sunlit aqueducts, the pulse of Roman life shifts from labor to leisure, from commerce to spectacle. Entertainment in Rome was not merely a pastime. It was a reflection of power, status, and the complex social fabric that bound citizens together. The amphitheaters, the grandest being the Colosseum, rise like colossal stone sentinels over the city, capable of holding tens of thousands of spectators. Each seat a vantage point into a world of drama, violence, and ritualized performance. Here, gladiators often, slaves, prisoners, or trained warriors engage in combats that are both brutal and highly choreographed. Their every move followed by the roar of the crowd, the clash of weapons, and the tension of life teetering on the edge of death. Some historians argue that these spectacles served as a form of social control, a way for the elite to display power while appeasing the populace, whereas others suggest they were genuine expressions of fascination with human courage and mortality. Beyond the arenas, the Circus Maximus offers a different thrill: chariot races that blur speed, skill, and danger, where horses and drivers compete in a dizzying spiral around the track. The air filled with dust, shouts, and a scent of sweat and horseflesh. Theaters host comedies and tragedies that explore the human condition, blending entertainment with moral and philosophical reflection, and drawing citizens into stories of gods, heroes, and ordinary men facing extraordinary circumstances. Roman baths, too, become centers of both hygiene and social life. Grand complexes where hot and cold pools, steam rooms, and exercise areas create spaces for relaxation, conversation, and sometimes intrigue. In these settings, all classes mingled, though in separate sections, sharing in the rhythm of daily cleansing, gossip, and intellectual exchange. Some researchers believe that the combination of spectacle, leisure, and communal spaces was crucial to the stability of urban life, offering relief and distraction from the hardships of daily existence. Others suggest that beneath the surface of leisure, these spaces reveal much about Roman values: discipline, competition, status, and the interplay of fear and admiration. As night falls and torches light the streets, the sounds of music, laughter, and distant cheers weave into the fabric of the city, creating a living tapestry of experience. One can almost feel the weight of history pressing in, the ghosts of past spectators, performers, and citizens lingering in the echoes of each amphitheater and bath. And as we leave these arenas and pools behind, one cannot help but wonder what dreams, ambitions, and fears accompanied the Romans as they returned home to insulate beneath the same star-strewn sky that witnessed the empire's grandeur. As the night settles over the sprawling cityscape of ancient Rome, a quiet reflection emerges from the shadows of colonnades, aqueducts, and crowded insulae, whispering tales of a civilization that reached for the heights of human achievement, and yet grappled with the weight of its own contradictions. The Roman Empire, at its peak, was not merely a collection of cities and territories. It was an intricate web of culture, power, law, and human endeavor that left an indelible mark on the course of history. Its roads, stretching across continents, carried more than armies and merchants. They carried ideas, philosophies, and the mingling of countless peoples whose languages, religions, and customs would shape the very fabric of Europe and the Mediterranean for centuries. The architectural marvels, from the Colosseum to the Pantheon, stand as silent witnesses to the ambition, ingenuity, and artistry of a people who sought to impose order and beauty upon the chaos of existence. Some scholars argue that Roman law, with its codified statutes, judicial procedures, and complex concepts of citizenship, laid the foundation for modern legal systems, influencing governance, rights, and a structure of justice across the world. Others point to Roman engineering, the aqueducts, roads, and public works as a testament to the empire's ability to transform its environment, to bend nature to human needs, and to create infrastructure that would endure long after its political power waned. Beyond these tangible legacies, the Romans instilled a cultural memory that endures in language, literature, and thought. Latin became the root of Romance languages, while Roman literature and philosophy continued to educate, inspire, and provoke debate for millennia. Yet, the empire's story is also one of fragility, of wealth and violence coexisting, of societal inequalities and political corruption that ultimately contributed to its transformation. Walking through the imagined streets, hearing the distant echoes of marketplace chatter, the splash of fountains, and the murmurs of scholars debating in shaded atria, we sense both the grandeur and the impermanence of human ambition. The legacy of Rome is not merely in stones or scrolls, but in the questions it leaves us about power, society, morality, and the pursuit of knowledge, as we drift from these streets into a realm of quiet reflection. We carry with us the memory of a civilization that was as brilliant as it was flawed, whose echoes resonate in every city, courtroom, and library that followed. Sit back, relax, and let your mind linger on the mysteries of Rome, on the lives of its citizens, both grand and humble, and on the enduring shadow of an empire that continues to captivate, inspire, and haunt us. What lessons lie hidden in the ruins, and what whispers of the past will we carry forward into our own future? As the sun dipped below the horizon and the clamour of the marketplace faded into memory, the city of Rome transformed, revealing another side of its heartbeat, the pulse of entertainment and spectacle. Theatres and amphitheaters came alive, their stone facades glowing in torchlight, drawing crowds eager to witness performances that ranged from the comic to the horrific. The scent of roasted nuts and sweet honey cakes mingled with the dust kicked up by thousands of feet, while the air thrummed with anticipation. Comedy was a favorite pastime. Actors in elaborate masks delivered sharp, exaggerated lines that made the audience laugh, jeer, and sometimes gasp at the cleverness of human folly laid bare on stage. Yet, these theatrical amusements were but a prelude to the main attraction, the gladiatorial games. The Colosseum, a colossal structure of stone and engineering genius, could hold up to 50,000 spectators, all gathered to witness the raw drama of life and death. Gladiators, often slaves, prisoners of war, or criminals, stepped into the arena clad in armor that glinted like fire under the sun, swords and tridents poised for battle. Others would face wild animals brought from the farthest reaches of the empire, lions from Africa, bears from the forests of Europe, and exotic beasts from lands almost mythical to the Roman mind. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a living tide of emotion that ebbed and flowed with each strike, each daring maneuver, each gasp of near death and survival. Wealthy patricians occupied the prime seats, cloaked in togas that shimmered with dyed fabrics, while the plebeians jostled in the upper tiers, their voices blending into a single river of sound that carried across the arena. Beyond the spectacle of combat, the games were a display of power, a reminder of the emperor's reach and the state's ability to command life itself. Yet, the thrill of danger was not limited to the arena. Chariot races at the Circus Maximus drew tens of thousands, horses thundering across the track, wheels clashing, dust clouds billowing, the scent of sweat and leather heavy in the air. Evenings like these were intoxicating, a mixture of fear, excitement, and communal experience, leaving spectators buzzing long after the crowds dispersed. But as the torches dimmed and the city settled into the hush of night, another world waited in silence, the quiet intellectual life of Rome, where thought, philosophy, and letters held sway, offering a different kind of power. How did the same city that craved blood and spectacle also nurture the mind? That is the mystery we explore in the next section, as the echoes of the Colosseum faded into the night. Another Rome emerged, quieter yet no less alive, where the pursuit of knowledge and the art of thought shaped the very fabric of society. In private homes, the flickering glow of oil lamps illuminated the faces of children bent over wax tablets, their styluses scratching out the Latin alphabet under the watchful eye of a tutor. Education was not free, and the wealthier a family, the greater the opportunities for their offspring to ascend the social ladder through learning. The first step was mastering the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic, often recited aloud in rooms filled with the collective murmur of children practicing their lessons, a sound both chaotic and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of young ambition. Beyond the fundamentals, promising students advanced to the grammaticus, a teacher who opened the doors to the literary worlds of Greece and Rome. Here, the young minds absorbed the moral and cultural lessons of Homer, Virgil, and Plato, while also learning Greek, a language that opened doors to diplomacy, philosophy, and commerce. The grammaticus also instructed in rhetoric, the art of persuasive speech, a skill as essential in the forum as it was in the Senate. Some researchers suggest that this dual emphasis on literature and rhetoric created a generation of citizens capable of both deep thought and public persuasion, while others argue it imposed a rigid, almost suffocating discipline that left little room for creativity. For the most privileged, the journey culminated in advanced studies of rhetoric and philosophy, akin to a modern university education, preparing them for careers in law, politics, or public administration. Libraries, both public and private, served as repositories of wisdom, filled with scrolls that carried the insights of thinkers across time and space, while public lectures and debates offered forums for intellectual exchange that rivaled the arenas in their intensity and drama. Yet, this intellectual pursuit coexisted with a society obsessed with spectacle and power, creating a tension between the mind and the body, between contemplation and action. Romans respected Greek culture, yet critics lamented that the emphasis on Greek learning sometimes overshadowed traditional Roman virtues. Corporal punishment and strict discipline were common, a reminder that education was both a privilege and a tool for social conditioning. As the night deepened and the lamps dimmed, one could almost hear the whispers of Plato and Aristotle mingling with the rustle of scrolls, a silent testament to the enduring hunger for knowledge. And while the city slept, the seeds of ideas were being planted, waiting to blossom in the minds of future leaders, philosophers, and citizens. But beyond the quiet study halls, another pulse awaited the rhythm of daily life in the streets, markets, and homes of ordinary Romans. What did the world look like through the eyes of those who did not tread marble halls but walked crowded streets? That is the journey we take in the next section. Step out from the quiet chambers of learning and into the bustling arteries of Rome, where the city throbs with life and sound. The streets themselves are a mosaic of activity, a tangle of pedestrians, carts, and animals moving to the rhythm of a city that never truly sleeps. Markets, or mela, as the Romans called them, serve as the lifeblood of urban existence, a place where commerce, gossip, and politics intertwine in a chaotic yet familiar dance. Farmers from the countryside lay out their produce bright green leeks, crimson apples, golden pears, while fishermen display glistening catches, the scent of the sea mingling with the earthy aroma of fresh bread baked in nearby ovens. Bakers, potters, and craftsmen call out their wares, competing for attention in a chorus of shouts and bartering. Coins clink, voices rise and fall, and the hum of conversation carries news from one corner of the empire to another. Some researchers suggest that the marketplace was a crucible of social interaction, where people of differing classes and backgrounds met, negotiated, and learned about the wider world, while others propose that it reflected the rigid hierarchies of Roman society, where wealth and influence often dictated one's ability to thrive in such spaces. Amid the clamor, the senses are constantly engaged. The texture of woven cloth, the scent of spiced wine, the taste of freshly baked bread, the cool touch of water from public fountains. Here, wealth and poverty intersect. The patricians may pass through in their carriages, barely acknowledging the lives teeming around them, while plebeians haggle for their daily needs, their laughter, complaints, and occasional disputes painting the soundtrack of ordinary life. And yet, even within this apparent chaos, there is an order, the careful arrangement of stalls, the timing of deliveries, the unspoken rules of negotiation that structured this microcosm of Rome. As the sun climbs higher, the market reaches its peak, a swirling tableau of energy and purpose, only to gradually empty as evening approaches. But the city's life does not pause. The energy merely shifts, moving from open-air commerce to the private theaters, bathhouses, and homes where citizens relax, debate, and prepare for the spectacles that define Roman entertainment. From the marketplace, we move seamlessly into the domestic sphere, exploring the homes of the wealthy and the crowded insulae of the common people, revealing a society where grandeur and struggle coexisted side by side. And as we turn the corner from the streets into the quiet courtyards, one question lingers. What did it feel like to live in a city of such contrast, where the pulse of trade, spectacle, and domestic life intertwined so intimately? Imagine stepping into a Roman household at dawn, the soft light spilling across terracotta floors, the air thick with anticipation and the faint scent of olive oil from the morning meal. The city outside is stirring, but inside, the quiet hum of learning begins to take shape. Education in ancient Rome was a privilege, not a right, a pursuit that demanded both wealth and diligence. Children were gathered into the modest rooms of a ludi magister, the primary school teacher, where the walls seemed to echo with the repeated chants of young voices. Lessons were not whispered or studied quietly at a desk. They were recited aloud. In a rhythmic cadence, a chorus of names, letters, and numbers bouncing off the stone walls. Some children mastered the basics quickly, while others struggled under the gaze of strict discipline. For corporal punishment was common and the teacher's authority absolute. Once the foundations of reading, writing, and arithmetic were laid, the student would progress to the grammaticus, a tutor of literature and language, with a world of Greek and Roman authors unfolded before them. Scrolls filled with the words of Homer, Virgil, and Cicero became more than just text. They were vessels of moral guidance, cultural identity, and intellectual aspiration. Learning Greek alongside Latin was considered essential, a key to accessing the rich tapestry of knowledge inherited from the Hellenistic world. Here, Rhetoric was introduced not merely as speech, but as the art of persuasion, the tool by which one could command assemblies, debate the Senate, and leave a mark upon the world. For the wealthiest families, education culminated in studies of philosophy and advanced rhetoric, a pathway almost indistinguishable from what we would call a university today. Yet, even within this structured hierarchy, criticism lingered. Some Romans feared that the fascination with Greek culture eroded traditional Roman virtues, that the endless memorization and recitation stifled creativity and independent thought. Others questioned the harshness of discipline, the whiplash of fear and respect imposed upon young minds. And yet, despite these murmurs of dissent, the Roman system of education endured, shaping generations of citizens, lawmakers, and philosophers. As the sun climbs higher, spilling golden light across the city, we can hear the faint echo of scrolls rustling in private libraries and the distant murmur of public debates, where men wrestle with ideas as much as with each other. From the hush of a classroom to the grandeur of the Senate, Roman education was the first step into a world of intellect, ambition, and subtle intrigue. But as we close the doors on the teachers' rooms and corridors of learning, we prepare to step outside where the marketplace awaits, alive with color, sound, and a chaos that is uniquely Roman, beckoning us into the pulse of daily life. Step with me now into the wide open chaos of a Roman forum, the marketplace that thrums like the pulse of the city itself. Imagine a labyrinth of stalls, each one overflowing with the scents, colors, and sounds of everyday life. Ripe figs stacked beside bowls of glistening olives, the metallic tang of freshly minted coins clattering as merchants haggle with determined energy, and the briny aroma of fish from the nearby coastal provinces wafting through the air. Farmers arrive before dawn, carts creaking under the weight of wheat, vegetables, and fruits harvested at first light, while fishermen call out the day's bounty, their voices cutting through the hubbub like a sharp blade. The bakers entice passers-by with the warm, yeasty smell of bread still steaming from the oven, and in quieter corners, craftsmen display pottery, tools, and household wares, each piece telling a story of skill and tradition. But the market is not merely a place to trade goods. It is a theatre of human interaction, a stage upon which the social and political life of Rome unfolds. Patrons exchange news from distant provinces, discuss the latest decrees from the Senate, and debate moral and philosophical questions with the same energy reserved for bargaining over a fresh fish. Slaves and laborers move among the crowds, carrying heavy loads, their presence a reminder of the social hierarchy that underpinned every transaction. Street performers add another layer of life to this scene. Musicians strumming lyres, acrobats twisting in impossible formations, and storytellers spinning tales that blend myth and news, capturing the imagination of all who pause to listen. Even the clatter of coins and the cries of vendors seem orchestrated, a chaotic symphony that only the Romans could navigate with ease. The marketplaces, or mela, were microcosms of the empire itself, bringing together people from every corner of the Mediterranean, each contributing a fragment of culture, language, and tradition to the larger mosaic. And yet, amid the clamor, one cannot ignore the undercurrent of tension, the constant negotiation of power, wealth, and influence that mirrored the political struggles of the Republic and Empire beyond these crowded streets. As the sun tilts toward noon, The shadows of the buildings stretch across the cobblestones, and the market slowly shifts from frenzied trade to quieter exchanges, leaving behind lingering scents of oil, grain, and sweat. We leave this vivid tapestry of sound and motion with a sense of wonder, realizing that life in Rome was not only about survival or trade, it was a performance, a social contract written in movement, sound, and exchange. And as we step away from the bustling market, the question lingers, beyond the clamor and color. What did it truly feel like to be a citizen of Rome, living amidst this ceaseless energy, craving entertainment, sustenance, and status in equal measure? Next, we move from the marketplace to the tables and homes of the Romans, where meals, luxury, and daily life reveal a different side of this empire. As we step away from the cacophony of the marketplace, we enter the quieter, more intimate spaces of Roman life, the homes where wealth, status, and daily routine intertwine. Imagine walking through a narrow street lined with insulae, the multi-story apartment buildings that housed the majority of Rome's population. These structures were often precariously built, with wooden beams and crumbling plaster and fires, or partial collapses were a constant threat. Families lived in cramped rooms, sharing cooking spaces and communal latrines, yet even here, life was vivid and communal. The chatter of children, the smell of simmering stews, and the rhythmic pounding of water drawn from a nearby fountain created a constant, pulsing soundtrack. In contrast, the villas of the wealthy patricians were a different world altogether. Expansive, elegant, and meticulously designed. Picture walking through a sun-drenched atrium, the heart of the home, with an open-air courtyard lined with marble columns, intricate mosaics underfoot, and the scent of flowering plants drifting from a central garden. Off the atrium, rooms branch out, dining halls adorned with frescoes depicting mythological tales, bedrooms with soft, embroidered linens, and private baths where hot water pools reflected the flickering torchlight. Meals in Rome were both sustenance and spectacle. The poor often ate simple fare bread, olives, lentils, and the occasional piece of salted fish or pork, while the wealthy feasted on exotic imports: peacock, dormice, garum sauces that tingled the tongue, and fruits brought from far-off provinces. Wine flowed freely at these gatherings, diluted for moderation, but always central to conversation and ritual. Even in daily life, the Romans placed immense value on leisure and social interaction. Courtyards became spaces for discussion, philosophical debate, or quiet reflection. Kitchens echoed with the clatter of utensils and the low murmur of servants attending to their master's needs. Yet, beneath the veneer of elegance or the simplicity of survival, there existed an awareness of fragility. For the poor, a fire or collapse could upend everything, while the rich balanced opulence with the constant threat of political intrigue, debt, or shifting fortunes. Public baths punctuated both worlds, offering a space where classes converged. In water and steam, exchanging gossip, exercising, and discussing politics. And through it all, the Romans lived with a profound awareness of mortality, of the fleeting nature of wealth and life, mirrored in their temples, tombs, and art. As we step back into the streets from these homes, carrying the scent of bread, flowers, and incense with us, we must ask, how did these spaces, cramped or luxurious, shape the minds, values, and ambitions of those who lived within them? Next, we move from the private sphere to the grand arenas of Roman entertainment. where spectacle and spectacle alone ruled the day.